Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Fans, the fans. Yeah. So this morning, when we began, it was noticed that a few people, and this was also noticed on Tuesday, that a few people were not breathing, or were breathing very shallowly, almost not at all. So I wanted to remind you all that when you come to sit in silence, maybe the very first thing you can do, before you start the inquiry, before you even ask, am I aware, is you can check in with the body to see if you are breathing. The reason that I mention this is that when we come in to silence, whether it's here or at home, or in the ashram or anywhere, there's a certain amount of momentum to the mind. That momentum is happening quite naturally, stimulated by what we see, what we experience on our way to satsang, by how our morning went and so on. So the mind can already be quite active when we come in. You may have noticed that. And it can take some time for that activity to slow down. One of the aids to that activity slowing down is to notice that you are breathing. It's very simple, very direct. So I would just encourage you to check in when you come and you sit and you begin to enter into stillness, that you check. How am I breathing? Is my breathing natural? Is it shallow? Is it high up in the top of the lungs, or is it in the belly? When the breathing is shallow, or it's high up in the lungs, the oxygen to the brain slowly begins to diminish. So this has a couple of effects. One is that if that you sit in that condition for very long, normally you will go into a kind of torpor or a kind of sleepiness, because there's not enough oxygen in the brain to maintain awareness, to maintain presence. Secondly, if you start the inquiry before you are fully here, even in the recognition that you are a body, the inquiry, the question, who am I, or the noticing, am I aware, tends to stay as a mental activity. So the momentum of thinking that you came into the room or into your period of silence or stillness with tends to feed off of a kind of energy that comes in the mind when there's insufficient oxygen. So either you will fall asleep or go into a state of torpor, or without even realizing it, there will be a natural anxiety that starts to rise in the body-mind. And this is because the body-mind is getting the message from the brain that there's insufficient oxygen. And this will feed a kind of anxiety. So the reason I'm telling you these things is so that you become more aware of what happens in the processes of your own body and how you can use them in the inquiry. So when you first come in to sit, you can do this now. Be sure that you connect with your breath. So take an in-breath and take this breath, not with a lot of struggle or effort, but take it all the way to the base. Take it all the way into the belly. If the breath stops here in the chest, in the upper chest, or even if it stops here in the center chest, eventually you will begin to have this experience of running out of oxygen, of not having enough. When you run out of oxygen, you have not enough energy for the kind of alertness that I talk about in terms of the components of awareness, presence, alertness, and emptiness. So there won't be sufficient attention, if you will, for you to be able to simply be here in a resting state of alert awareness. So take a couple of breaths, 2, 3, 4. But as I said, this is not a breath which is straining you. Just be aware that you are breathing and that that breath is fully present in the body, all the way into the belly. There's a natural resting when you get to the bottom, so don't press it, don't push it. Just let there be a resting moment. And then the exhale will come on its own. Let the exhale go all the way out. There'll be a natural pause. Don't let it build up a pressure. Let the next inhale come. Take it all the way to the belly. Let the exhale come. So doing this a few times provides oxygen to the brain for the next part of your sitting stillness or presence in satsang or at home. And this is to notice, I am aware. By taking a few natural but complete breaths, and then just letting the breath go into its natural state, you can notice right away that there's a lightness to the mind, maybe an energy that comes, an awareness of energy in the body or in the mind, or both. It's in this environment that you can notice very clearly and very directly and very quickly that which is aware is here now. You can do this by asking the question, am I aware? Right away you say, yes, you know you are aware. And there is sufficient energy in the lightness of being to let the attention rest there as that awareness. This is not an effort, this is a recognition. I am aware. From here, you can either ask the question, who is aware, or who am I? Or you can simply rest in the empty recognition that which is aware is here now. From there, if thinking arises, if thoughts arise, if emotion arises, if awareness of sound, heat and cold rises in the body, it does so in the space of awareness itself, in this natural recognition of presence. I am here. In this natural awareness, it rises. Now you have synchronized a natural cycle of breathing into a natural awareness of presence with enough energy, with enough lightness in the mind to be able to sit as yourself. And to know that you are fully here. And that this sense of here-ness is who you are. This sense of presence, alertness, and the empty recognition that everything which comes into awareness is rising in the space of awareness itself and is coming and going quite naturally. So now, you are simply here. Bhagavan said, let what comes come and let what goes go. But if there isn't sufficient presence and there isn't sufficient energy and there isn't a recognition that you are not the body, you are not the mind, it becomes very difficult at moments to remain as this simple I am presence or I am recognition. So this is a way to do this in several quick and simple steps. It takes me much longer to describe it to you in detail than it does for you to actually do it. So if you begin your practice this way, you're sitting, you're quiet, whether you are here in the ashram, you're at home, you give yourself the opportunity through this initial kind of 3-step process to simply be present, to be here. If you need to, you can repeat it later in your sit. If you find yourself becoming distracted by thinking, by emotions, by the environment you're in, eventually you become impervious to all of this. Thoughts come and go, emotions come and go, sensations come and go, experiences come and go. But this sense that awareness is here, this I amness, which is free of any, or empty of any self-involvement on the level of the personal, becomes your natural way of being. Now you can go anywhere, do anything, be in any environment with anything rising and falling in body, mind, and world, and you will be aware, not of me, but of awareness itself. You will be awareness itself. Present here now as being consciousness and bliss, aware, loving, kind, dancing with whatever is here. initially, when you take up this kind of practice or engagement with the moment, what happens is the silence or stillness, which ordinarily is in the background of your awareness, starts to become more obvious to you. You may have already had glimpses of this. Most of you here, I know, have had glimpses of this. Some of you are even well established in it already. But by engaging in a practice like this, what begins to happen is you begin to see that the silence, this aware presence, which you are, is actually the foundation for everything else which is going on. And this permits this silence or this awareness to become stable, so that rather than being back here in the background somewhere and your attention being focused out here on all of the objects, on all of the experiences and all of the activities of mind, the awareness begins to become holistic and everything is rising in that. And now one sees as the dominant awareness the silence or awareness itself. And this remains and the attention remains in this space of awareness, you can say, as awareness itself. It's not actually a space. It's not an object. It's not something you can see. It's only something you can be. But this begins to become the ground of your being. And this gives us the opportunity to allow thoughts, emotions, sensations, and activities to float in this awareness, coming and going, as Bhagavan said, without identifying with it in a deep way. We may still have some identification. We are humans. We have bodies. We have minds. There is conditioning. We may still have some identification for a long period of time. But this identification will not own us. We will have this way of stepping back from whoever we think we are into who we really are, which is before the activity of body, mind, and world. And then we can move, as you will, through the activity of body, mind, and world as presence, as alertness, but completely empty of any identification. In this moment, we are dancing with life. The dominant experience at that moment becomes enjoyment and happiness. Without effort. We're not being happy. We simply are happy. Some of you have already had this experience. Okay, we have a microphone over here that records your conversation. If you are interested in talking with me, please take the microphone so that we can record it. We will pass it to you if you want it. Just raise your hand. Okay. I had a feeling it was you who was coming next. Hello.
Well, as per normal, I'm not sure what I'm going to say.
Very good.
So I'll just be open. So I very much enjoyed arriving and meeting you, and then just going into that. And then you hear all your mind making my mind, which is the only mind I know, making all these judgments, and then you control it and you stop it. And I just was really enjoying my meditation there.
Yes.
Of actually seeing how, and being conscious and admitting my mistakes to myself. Of like when you think, and I'm probably a very good example of it. You think someone's thinking about you in a situation that happened yesterday, and someone's blanking you and being very, and so then your mind gets into making a judgment.
Yes, projection of some sort.
So I always writing here that like you do acceptance, and I do that actually. I'm incredibly lucky. I love life, every moment of it, and I
Very
get
good.
to walk around, and I just never can quite believe how lucky I am. So. But and that other experience is just when again, it was actually Krishna was with me, and I was walking around, and I found this cafe, and it disappeared. And I was just walking, as you say, just completely in the present. And I looked and I went, it used to be there. That's where it was. And then the old woman who ran it just burst into total enjoyment because I was there, because she'd been thrown out, moved to there, but I turned up. So what I can express is that incredible giving you get by that's there. That's life. It's fantastic.
Yes.
So I may not have made much sense.
When you can rest. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, you can really rest, and you're really present all the time. All the time. I think I'm very lucky in that way. And just
beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah, just hold it. Someone will raise their hand at some point. Is there too much wind in here for you? Okay. Good. Pranam.
So, Rishi, I want to ask, when we try to discipline the body, it is still okay, it's not too difficult. The speech also we can do sattvic, we can do good, control it to some degree.
Yeah.
But the mind is very difficult.
You've noticed, yes.
To keep the sattvic and like nice. So I'm wondering if there is technique which can help.
So yes, there is definitely. How do we keep the mind? But understand that it's less of a technique and more of an allowing. And it's almost counterintuitive, because if we have a difficult mind, or we're in a mind attack, let's say, something has provoked the mind energies are really engaged and really busy. Under ordinary circumstances, for most people, before there's a firm foundation in awareness itself or as being consciousness, there's a tendency to want to push that away, or to get rid of it, or to judge it as though it's wrong. The mind is doing this and it's carrying on in this way. So the counterintuitive part is to observe and do nothing. And this takes some getting used to. So we can say some practice. We're not accepting the content of the mind. We're actually not concerned with the content of the mind at all. What we are noticing, however, is that the mind is there. That activity is going on, right? And that there's a tendency to want to identify with it. There's a tendency to want to engage with it. There's a tendency to want to change it in some way. But the key is to realize I am not what that content is. Rather, what is here is aware of this content. So if there is awareness of thinking, awareness of mind, awareness of, because remember, there really is no mind. What we call mind is really a process of thinking that I shouldn't say there is no mind. I should say mind, in the biggest sense, is the background on which is projected, or on which is seen, thoughts. So we can say mind is like an empty screen in a theater. When you turn on the projector, a whole life unfolds. Yes? On the screen. Completely forget about the screen. Yeah? And we become engaged in the movie. Mind is like this. Mind is a blank screen. This is all, using the word mind in this way is comparable to saying the self, right? Or Brahman, or life itself is a blank screen on which are projected thoughts, emotions, feelings, experiences like this. When we become engaged in those, this is what we mean by we become identified with them. So it's like we are sitting in the theater and we are completely immersed. We are terrified because there is fire on the screen. We are drowning because there is water on the screen. We are completely immersed in this way, completely forgetting that there is a silent emptiness behind, which is making that image visible to us. So mind is like this. Mind, being, consciousness is an empty space or an empty screen. And on this is projected our conditioning, our samskaras, our tendencies. All of this is being projected. So if you say, how do we deal with the mind? The way to deal with the mind is remember the screen. Remember it is a screen. That what you are seeing is a reflection of consciousness itself, but is not consciousness itself. What you are seeing is a reflection of awareness seeing its own tendencies, its own samskaras. But behind those is the empty awareness of being consciousness. That empty awareness, one can say, is love which is not veiled by samskaras. It's compassion which is not veiled by tendencies. That is what is there as the natural creation of being consciousness. So the way we do this is over repeated moments of awareness. We remind ourselves, there's a remembrance, right? That I am not this thinking. I am not this thought. Then the question naturally arises, well, if I am not this thought, if I'm not this emotion, if I'm not this conditioned wheel, like a squirrel wheel or a hamster wheel, this is what the mind does. It goes as a conditioned hamster wheel. You say, I am not this. Then the question naturally comes, who am I? Or what is aware here? If I am not that, then what am I? So this is the way, the gateway into inquiry using this mind. So implied in this description or in this pointer is that you have to remind yourself, even if you have to put sticky notes on the fridge, even if you have to tape something on the window or on the door, you have to remind yourself throughout the day that you are not what you are observing in terms of experience, in terms of thoughts. And then life can become quite beautiful, as was being described. You are walking around knowing that you are this presence and you are liberated or freed from the movie of the mind. And you are walking around through time and space that appears as this awareness, which is free, alert, and empty. Allowing, accepting, enjoying whatever is here. There will never be enjoyment in the content of the mind. Why? Because it's not true. Enjoyment, deep enjoyment, comes from the recognition of truth itself, being consciousness, the self, life itself. This is truth. The knowing of this, the recognition of this, has inherent in it a natural joy and happiness. This is not present in the content of the mind. You may have noticed that. Yeah, that the content of the mind is not inherently happy, it is not inherently joyful, and it is not inherently without a sense of problematic or difficulty. This is conditioning which is rising. These are tendencies which are rising. These are samskaras which are rising. And they are, in them is not an inherent happiness. So once we know this and we accept this as the nature of truth, the foundation of our practice actually becomes quite simple. It's to remember that which is aware, is here now, or to ask the question, who am I? Who am I referring to when I'm engaged in all this identity in the mind? Or to simply come to the moment by moment by moment practice of happiness, even when we don't feel it as an emotion, but rather to realize that we are joyful to be here in life, to have this opportunity, this kind of base happiness. I am happy to be alive, even when it's difficult, even if I have enormous challenges in the mind, in the body, physically, emotionally, even if I have these challenges, which I recognize, I am still happy to be here and to have this opportunity. So then we can say our practice becomes happiness. And the reason we call it a practice is because it's not our every moment state yet. So we have to return to it. We have to sort of play with it, recognize our own happiness, right? Because we accept what the teaching of the sages, which says the knowing of truth is true happiness. So we know that this is within us. This happiness is within us. It's not out here in the world. It's not in the mind. It's not in the experiences. It's not in the sensations of the body. It actually is present as being consciousness. So we just keep reminding ourselves to come back to happiness. This is the most direct way. Doesn't involve the mind at all. It involves us simply coming into the body with this recognition, taking a full breath. I am here now. That which is aware is here now. All is well. When we practice in this way, what we call mind, which is just the patterns of thinking, begins to get the message that the new pattern of thinking is I am happiness. I am awareness. I am here. That which is aware is here now. This is the new pattern of thinking. And the older patterns of thinking begin to disintegrate. Now, for some people, that disintegration will happen immediately. As soon as someone says, the truth of your being is that you are happiness, they will go, oh, I am. I can feel that. Great. Now I go on. I never see them again. But for others, there is this recognition that this is going to take some time for this condition, the momentum of conditioning, to sort of wear itself out. But nonetheless, this doesn't mean that we should invalidate the practice of simple happiness. If we are able to enjoy the company of another person, we are able to enjoy a walk. Many of us come to this natural recognition of happiness early on before we become true seekers or meditators, however we describe ourselves, by simply finding ourselves in nature and realizing that we relax. We are walking through the forest, we are walking, we are sitting somewhere under a tree, we are at the beach, and we recognize that in this moment, there is a simple and present awareness of happiness. And this comes to us quite naturally because there's a truthfulness to it. Now, when we become confused, identified, lost in thinking, it becomes helpful to remember these moments of simple and natural happiness. And that's why it said, if you are really experiencing a mind attack, don't just sit and struggle with it somewhere. Go for a walk, go be around water, go to the ashram and sit among other people who are there in this simple quiet and silence. You can definitely struggle with it if you want, but to struggle with a mind that is unruly is to go in the opposite direction of the recognition that happiness is your nature and your being. Ordinary happiness, not the kind of happiness that wants to dance around all the time, but ordinary happiness. Look within yourself. Ask this question, am I aware? Who is this I that I'm referring to? Leave the content of the thinking alone. breathe, rest, and enjoy the simple acknowledgement that you are here as presence. Helpful?
Uh,
I wasn't sure. You looked like you weren't sure.
no.
Was there another question there? Was there
Yes,
something fun?
I want to ask, but I
No,
don't know.
please, you are here. We are here.
Uh,
We are speaking for everyone now. You and I, we are speaking for everyone. So.
uh, I was just thinking, like, when something happens and we don't like it, or we say no to it, or we don't approve it, and we start thinking it shouldn't have happened, or we would like to fix it or something. So, like, in the truth, what is the truth? Like, it uh, what we are thinking is not true, or
The truth is before all thinking. So understand that if something comes up like, I don't like that, or I want to change that, it's possible that something like that can happen quite naturally, right? You simply move into some activity which seeks to change it. Maybe you've said something you wish you hadn't said, you go and apologize to the person. So, this happens all quite naturally. But once this entanglement around thinking starts to happen, it's important to realize that now what is arising is not the experience in that moment. What is arising is some kind of conditioning. What is arising is some kind of mind entanglement, some kind of samskara. You are not going to solve anything in the mind. Really, you are not going to solve anything in the mind. Understand there's a false belief happening here. Excuse me. That if I just think about this enough, if I do enough, I should have said, I could have said, I would have said, if I do enough of that, somehow it will be solved. No, this is the mind. This is the not truth. So if you really want to solve the problem for yourself, and you've already left the situation, maybe you've said your apology, maybe you didn't have a chance to say your apology. Say your apology in your heart, and then drop it. Anytime that there is something in the mind that I might refer to as a residual, so something happens, some thought is coming, some behavior is coming, some activity is coming, some experience is coming, within oneself, within life, within a parent other, with a relationship. Once that has occurred, walk away from it without residual, without any holding on. I should have, I could have, I ought to have, This is not productive. It doesn't help in the final analysis. So just be willing to put down this I should have, would have, could have conversation. This is all happening in the mind. This is a complete mind projection. If you need to say something to someone because of something that happened in your relationship or something, that person is going to step in front of you at some moment, and you can say, oh, you know what I said the other day? So sorry. I didn't mean to say that. That just blurted out. I don't know. You get your opportunity. If that opportunity doesn't arise, it's because it's not necessary. So just drop it. Don't keep mulling these things over. That's how we create conditioning, is we set up these tapes in the mind, and then we run everything through that tape system. And when something new happens, or something unexpected happens, or something unpleasant happens, we simply plug that into that tape system and keep rolling it. So at some point, understand that I use the word tape for a very good reason, not audio or video. I use the word tape because a tape can be cut. The cutting of that is the recognition that it was here, it rose, it stayed for a moment, it had a certain consequence or a certain outcoming, but then it fell. And at the moment of that falling, cut that tape. Finish it. Don't carry it on. So this is a discipline that we take up in the mind. The mind requires discipline. You may have noticed this. If you don't have some control over the mind or some discipline over the mind, everything becomes the mind's projection, becomes the mind's... But this is the mind. Your nature is that prior awareness of happiness. So this is what we want to keep coming back to. So we just keep cutting these tapes. We don't let them get started. Or if they do get started, we simply say, not this, not this, not this. I am not this. We're only doing this kind of activity as long as these kinds of conditionings or these habits are rising. Because if we cut the tapes, we stop the tapes often enough, we gently come to the mind and say, no, that's not me. I'm not that. We gently remind the mind that this is not necessary for it to go on in this way. Eventually we just stop because that habit dissolves. This is why Bhagavan said, the inquiry, who am I? I say, what am I aware? Notice I am aware. This is the stick that just keeps turning the fire that burns up all of these samskaras, burns up all of these tendencies. So notice that these are just tendencies which are rising in the mind. Don't make them significant or important. Then these tendencies can rise. You can see them. There can be an awareness that the tendency is there, and the tendency can fall, and there is no residual. And now you're chopping at the root of that samskara. And eventually it doesn't arise anymore.
She's like, I purchased something, and the wrong item I purchased.
Hmm?
And then I was struggling with it. Oh, I wasted money. So what I'm wondering is, do I need to end my attachment to money, or do I, like you were saying, it's not that, it's the tendency of thinking, like, if I caught it right. Then which is the...
First of all, then the tendency to think you've done something wrong. I think you just haven't recognized that you bought the right item. You just haven't realized what the use of it is yet. Something can come to you rather than judging yourself and so on. You can say, oh, isn't that interesting? I thought I was buying this, but the universe sent me that. So how can I use this? Do I need this? Can I use it for something? Maybe it's here for a reason. If you find out ultimately it's not here for a reason, fine, you can sell it or give it away. But under no circumstances blame yourself. There are no mistakes. Your relationship with money, everyone's relationship with money, by the way, is often challenging. But money is not anything other than energy. So you have a certain amount of energy which is available to you as money. You don't know why you bought the thing that you bought, right? You don't know who needed that money. Someone needed that money, so you spent it. The energy came to you as money. Someone needed that money and you passed it through. You passed the energy through. So that's what happened. Nothing else happened. For you, it's really important because we've had this conversation in some ways before, not about money certainly, but about other things. It's really important that you begin to recognize when this self-blaming characteristic rises. That's a tendency. That's a samskara. It's very good that you bring it up in that clear way, because when we talk about tendencies and samskaras, it's kind of, people can sometimes say, I'm not really sure what's a tendency or a samskara. Well, in Western psychological terms, we say self-blame. This is self-blame or self-criticism. In the East, this is just a recognition of samskara or of tendency, right? Sankalpa. It's just a tendency. So when something comes and you say, oh, I made a mistake, I bought the wrong thing, try to reframe that. Oh, I bought the right thing, I just don't know why. and wait for the reason to show up. This is not your reason, this is the reason of life itself. Of this, of course, is dependent upon you having enough financial resources to be able to just accept that that's what's happened. If you spent, 80,000 rupees on something and you need to return it, then by all means return it. That's just the dance of life, That's the dance of life. So the point of your activity may have not have been in the object, but in the process of it. Of thinking you were ordering one thing, of accidentally ordering another, of it having come, of going through the disappointment that you ordered the wrong thing, of seeing that tendency towards self-blame or self-criticism, and then having to go through the process of returning it to get your money back. There are no mistakes. So however that all works out is really not relevant in this process of self-awareness. It really is about whatever the dance is and remaining aware, open, loving, kind toward oneself, one's mind, one's experience, one's life itself.
Can I do some practice to remind myself to be kind to my mind? No.
So understand that kindness, that compassion is inherent in your nature. In other words, you already possess that. But you ask about a practice. The practice in inquiry is to look at what's here, that judgment, that criticism, that, and go, not that. If you repeatedly throughout the day recognize that you are not that, and not that, you peel away the veils, you peel away the layers of the onion, like an onion. You peel away the layers of what you are not. And then what is there is compassion and kindness. So in this case, it's much quicker, much more direct to meet everything that you are not with the knowledge of what you are not. I am not that, I'm not that, I'm not. This neti practice that Bhagavan talked about? I'm not that, I'm not that, not that, not that, not that. Do that 10,000 times a day with everything that arises and you become self-critical or self-judgmental. Not that, not that, not that. I'm not this thought, I'm not this way, not this, not. I'm not this samskara, I'm not this tendency. Do this until there's nothing remaining but what you are in truth, which is being, consciousness, love, compassion, kindness. These are the characteristics of the truth. If you can say they have the truth has characteristics. The truth manifests as kindness, compassion, self-awareness. You're already that. So begin by recognizing what you are not, and you will eventually arrive there. You will not arrive at nothing. You will arrive at what you are. You will not become anything new or different. You will arrive at what you are. And that will be without all of this self-blame, self-criticism, and so on. Because that is not truth. So it has to go. It's untruth. So begin there. Not this, not this, not this, not this. Reveal who you are to yourself. This is the process of inquiry. Good. Thank you. It's always such a blessing when I see that smile return in you. Then I know that you have let go of that tendency toward self-criticism and self-blame. Thank you so much.
I would like to come back to this breath subject. Breath. Uh, I I think my breath is always quite shallow if I'm not trying to keep always all the time conscious attention to
Yeah.
it. So if I sit for self-inquiry, I can start sort of, as you say, to keep attention there. But then if I let go, and naturally I'm letting go, it after a few minutes I can notice that it's again quite shallow.
Yes.
So should I come back again, always to breath?
So the way to know whether to take a fuller breath again is actually to know whether there is still light and energy in the mind, or alertness in the mind, we can say. If we are in sitting, we come to this breath awareness only just to check in. So that's why I say do 2 or 3 breaths or 4 breaths and then just settle. Let yourself alone. This is not spending an hour and a half looking at the breath, although in some spiritual traditions, this is also one of the practices. So I would say to you, the only time you really need to do that again is if you are here and over the course of an hour, say we sit for an hour, or like today, an hour and 15 minutes. If over the course of that time you find yourself falling into torpor, falling into an empty state of nothingness, then what that says is that there is insufficient energy for inquiry, then, or for alertness in this moment. And then do again a few rounds of bringing energy into the oxygen into the body and into the mind to bring energy up. Because in the teachings of Vedanta and Advaita, it's been recognized for thousands of years that this state of torpor, or laya, it's called, it's not harmful, but it also isn't helpful in terms of coming to know the truth and coming to know who you are. So one of the things that happens for many practitioners is that sort of a habit pattern develops of being alert, aware, present, and empty at the beginning of a period of silence. But after 15 minutes or after an hour, the lights have gone out. So, and this is just like one step above deep sleep. Because you are here, you're sitting, you're not going to fall over. But if you were to lay down, you would go into deep sleep. Okay, so this can go on for many, many years of practice with some people, and ultimately it will break. But if you want to consciously come to the recognition that you can sit here in silent here, meaning satsang or at home or somewhere or in the forest, that you can sit for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, and you can be absolutely not present, but presence. You can be alert. The mind is aware. There's light is present in the mind and body. And that there is a feeling of emptiness or here nowness, which is devoid of objects. Then this is the definition, you can say, of awareness itself. And this is its natural state of being all the time. As soon as there's any kind of veiling that happens to this natural innate awareness, then we have these conditions of torpor, of falling asleep, of these kinds of things that begin to come. So then the breath awareness simply brings us a little bit more energy, brings us back to here now.
On the other hand, I noticed that when sort of everything is clear and only awareness is there, breath is, I cannot say it's shallow, but it's very almost is not there.
Yes. And in fact, in the samadhi states, the breath often stops. Yeah. So we're not talking about a shallowness of breathing that comes from natural wakefulness, natural awareness, and natural presence. We're not talking about that. Okay. We're talking about
this torpor.
We're talking about what leads to this torpor state, or often what happens is that when someone is dealing with something difficult emotionally or mentally, or there's a lot of thinking going on, or there's I was talking with him about this tape that gets going. This actually steals the energy of the body and mind, right? And so that causes us to start to lose awareness. That's different. So that's what I was addressing today. What you're bringing up is very good. It's very good that people know that this is also the case. So don't immediately judge because your breath is shallow at a given moment. That means that you are not fully present, because that apparent shallowness of breathing, which you probably won't notice if it's a samadhi state, right? Or it's just a trance state of some sort, that you have gone into deep recognition and awareness. You won't notice that the breath is shallow. You will, in fact, think you are breathing quite normally. That's what the experience will be. So that might be the difference, is that there's a recognition of breathing which still feels normal to you. And there's a state of silence and presence.
I feel like I have both.
Of course.
Sometimes this.
Yes, of course. So when you feel like you have both, I will tell you that you can begin to look for a moment in which it shifts from the recognition of being, consciousness, or presence, energy, and emptiness into torpor. There is a moment where if you insert a single breath or a single moment of reanimation of that alertness, you will pull yourself away from torpor, and so it's like you are finding the razor's edge. So you are not forcing yourself on one side, and you are not letting go completely on the other, so that you drift into torpor or into sleepy. There is a moment which, if you can remain alert for it, which is another form of practice. You see, anytime that you actually give yourself the opportunity to remain alert, looking for that moment when you slip into torpor, this brings energy and light to the mind. But when you become very familiar with that point, what is that balance point? Eventually you don't need to do that anymore. You simply stay at that balance point as a natural expression of what you've now learned about how being, consciousness, how alertness, mind, emptiness balance one another.
So this state of torpor, as you say, is totally of no use, or is there something also? Because I feel sometimes it's necessary to go consciously through this. Maybe something is there to observe there something, some unconscious state.
Yes, and I think that's absolutely true. I know that experience myself, and the tradition says of Vedanta doesn't say that it is of no value at all. It says it's of limited usefulness in the quest for self-realization, because of this tendency for it to slip from kind of a pre-sleep condition into deep sleep. Okay? So you can look at that yourself, If you understand, each and every one of you, that you are already here, that you are aware, and that this is this appearance of a process is a mind game in some way. You understand this completely, and you know that you are being, consciousness, that you are awareness itself, and this is your deep conditioning, your deep belief. You have come to this over and over and over, and no matter what comes up, it does not shake your belief or your recognition that you are being, consciousness, and bliss. You are Satchitananda, that this is your nature. You are truth itself. When this is unshakable, then it doesn't matter. Anything that comes up is just grist for the mill, you can say.
Okay, thank you.
Mm. Whatever's happening in this momentary awareness that you have, whether it's that you are slipping into torpor or you just came back from, some light just came back into the ability to observe and into the ability to know what's happening. The one thing to not do is become self-critical. Understand that at the moment you realize and recognize awareness is here now, that which is aware is here now, whatever came before is gone. So if you want to come to this recognition of awareness itself, of being consciousness, of present moment awareness, rejoice when you come back. And know that if you try to criticize yourself or you try to blame yourself, that is a tendency. That tendency that you're seeing for self-criticism, self-denial, is being seen in this present moment awareness, is being seen in truth. So you cannot be that. You are this awareness or this truth which is seeing that. So this is where you find your joy. Oh, I am back. Okay. I was gone for a while. Now I'm back. Okay, good. What came before doesn't matter. What matters at all times, in all places, under all conditions, in all circumstances, is this recognition. That which is aware is here now. That which is aware that it is aware. And I am that. Hari Om. Tat Sat.